Thank you so much for allowing me to come back again, and thank you for returning for those who have came from last week. And for those who don't know me, I'm Brett. And many people recognise us through the radio, and I love doing that medium. And it's been a wonderful privilege to be able to be heard in people's cars or in their homes, wherever it may be. And it's quite a fun thing. Did I tell you about the guy that actually used not nice language? Did I tell you that story last week? Oh, I'll tell you this story. Anyway, we don't often get complaints, people ringing up, but this one guy rings up and says, I want to speak to the big fella. And so my reception lady put me through, and he goes, you're the boss? And I said, yep. And he goes, I've got tears in my eyes, mate. I've got tears in my eyes. I said, why? He goes, that's the best. And you can use the imaginary language. That's the best content I've ever heard. I'm going to tell my trucking mates to listen to your program. I've got tears in my eyes, mate. I've got tears in my eyes. So he was a fan, obviously. And so all sorts of people get to hear us, and I find it really wonderful. But tonight, we're going to be talking about the big issues. And obviously, in a period of time, in a short period of time, it's difficult to cover everything. And so I want you to be able to ask some questions, and we'll have some interaction if we can. We've already had one person write a question. And for those who don't know, we're not only just in the Light radio station, we're actually in about 800 other radio stations, which equates to about 2 million people get to hear us every week. So it's very humbling to do that. We've got the YouTube channel, and obviously you're going to have it on the Church of Christ, Clayton Church of Christ YouTube channel, and we also got Facebook, and we just launched a new website this week. And so it's very exciting. It's been a very busy week. I spoke on Wednesday night, and I was speaking tonight. I also did I'm speaking on Sunday at another church for Mother's Day. My wife was going to be preaching, but she's lost her voice. And unfortunately, she's lost her voice for the last 8 weeks. And we've been looking everywhere, and we can't find it anywhere. And she was told this week if she doesn't rest it completely, she could lose her ability to speak. So it's been a humbling week, as you can imagine. I've done about 12 radio interviews. I've also done 3 podcasts and trying to prepare a message. But I am, as my mind's pretty busy because I'm just about to go on long service leave as of next week. And so there's been a number of things, but I'm really pleased that we're going to be talking about this really important topic that will help you and your family thrive. And that's what we're all about. If you want to find some other free videos, and everyone likes things for free, especially Christians, they love things for free. That's available to you, and there's a few brochures that you can actually look at there. But the one thing that we're just saying, it's National Families Week starting from the 15th. And it's a very exciting opportunity, and we're going to be doing a whole national campaign. And we just launched a family toolkit. And if you go to our website, and I encourage you all do it right now. Go get your phones out right now, and go to families.org.au, and then go to that website, and you'll see that looks like that. And then you'll be able to go put in your email address and your postcode. That's all you need to do. And then you'll be sent a link to have a downloadable I think there's about 12 different, or 15 different, different downloads on all things about family, about technology, about sex, about drugs and alcohol, anxiety, grief, depression, addictions, how to care for your older people in your world. There's everything there. It's a one-stop shop in this family toolkit. So please, encourage you, tell your family and friends that's all available for you for free, because everyone likes things for free, and to celebrate National Families Week. So you're the first people to hear this, all right? So it's going to be on the radio next week, but that's just been launched as of today. So that was just brand new. All right. So for those who don't know me, I mentioned last week that I've got 3 boys. And then they've grown up, and this is what they looked like when they were growing, just before they got all married. And one thing I like to say about this is my boys were known as the 3 amigos. And then for my 50th birthday, which was 5 years ago, they actually secretly filmed themselves, and it took 7 months to record my favourite movie. And on my birthday, which is the 24th of December, they said, "Dad, what do you want to do?" And I said, "Well, we're going to watch my favourite movie," which we always do. They said, "Fine." And they started playing the music, and then the subtitles came up, and it said, Taylor Ryan, Lachlan Ryan, Cameron Ryan. I was like, what's going on? And then they started singing, and it wasn't quite right. And so every camera angle, every line, every character they played, and they secretly filmed this over 7 months to give it on my birthday. It was the most. I've never cried so much and laughed at the same time. And they didn't know anything about film editing, so they looked it all up. And it was the most wonderful gift. And at the end of the movie, they actually shared why and how much they appreciated me. And it was a great gift. And the reason why I'm sharing that, not to say, hey, look at me, how wonderful I am. It's all been through relationship. And everything I'm going to be sharing with you today is going to be talking about the importance of having a healthy relationship with your kids. Earns you the right to speak into their lives about the big issues. Make sense? All right. So we don't want you just to thrive. We want you to thrive in this journey. And it is hard. It's difficult. And it's becoming more and more complicated. And how do we navigate these things? And as I said, you can actually ask some questions. And so I've already got, and so if you've got your phones out as well, you can actually go to slido.com, and everyone pretend to get your phones out if you want. You don't have to do this, but if you put in that phone, that number, hashtag 1771006, and you can put in anonymous questions. And so there is one question already there, and I do not privy these. I just get them as you get them. And it says, teenager has been playing online. This led to dating and online sex. One's 19, the other one's 17 years old. What do I do if I have talked to my child but no change? So if that person is in the room, this is a really challenging thing because there are legal ramifications and there's also, your moral values and the repercussions. So if it's online sex, this is another thing. And I know there's going to be children in this room, so I'm going to be modifying it, but I'm also not going to be protective because this is what their kids are going to be hearing, and it's going to be things that they're going to be exposed to. And I hope and trust that it'll be a catalyst for some ongoing conversations later on. So I can't protect everything just because children are in the room, because there's the adults here, but I'm also very mindful that we need to give you as much information as possible in a very short period of time to navigate those things. So as far as sending images, and this is probably sexting that they're doing, online sex, is that in their eyes, and I've got a bit more to show about this later on, but I thought I'd handle this question straight away. The fact is, we cannot control everything what our children do. We want to, but we can't. And they're going to make some decisions that we may not agree with, but it doesn't mean that we dismiss them and not love them anymore. We have to continue to come alongside them, maintain the relationship with them. For part of your role as parents is to be their prefrontal cortex, the front of the brain where rational thoughts take place. And so when you're growing, your brain is under construction. It takes about 28 years for a male brain to fully function, and it takes about 24 years for a female brain to fully function. So if you ever say the words, "What were you thinking?" your kids could actually say to you, "It's my prefrontal cortex, Mum or Dad. Bear with me, I'll get there." Because that's science. It's still developing, it's still growing. And part of your role is to start challenging them. And in this scenario, if you're telling them how bad everything is, they're not really seeing the repercussions because they're a here and now generation. But you can actually challenge them. What are your thoughts about if that other person sent those pictures to somebody else? What are your thoughts about what would take place if it goes, not only stays privately, but it goes to other people? How would you feel about that? Oh, I've never thought about that. Learning to respond, not react, is key. Maintaining your tone, maintaining your volume, maintaining your control. And I think I spoke about being on the inside, you may be freaking out. On the outside, cool, calm, and collected. And so as a result of this, there are other repercussions, because if once one person becomes a junior, is under the age of 18, any images, if someone is over the age of 18, if there's more than a 2-year break, once someone's become, so if it's a 15-year-old and a 17-year-old, it's apparently, according to the laws of the land, okay. But as soon as that person becomes 18 and one's 17, the person who has the adult, in inverted commas, they can then be charged with possession of child pornography. And if they are convicted, they would have to be on the sex registry for the rest of their lives. So it's significant. So that, as I said, you as parents are the prefrontal cortex. You have to start asking the questions for them to consider the repercussions. But I might talk about that a little bit more as we go along. But if there's some more questions, feel free to put them in about this topic today. And I'm just very mindful of, and I'll so put that in if you'd like. So today we're going to be talking about the big issues, and getting information is so helpful. And I'm going to download in as much as I can in a very short period of time. Information's power. The more information you have, the better it's going to be for you, because the more confident you are, the more competent you are, and the ability to communicate this with your kids. So we have to get out of our comfort zone. Quite easy, it's just like give it to somebody else. You know, give it to the school to sort out. Give it to the church to sort out. But you have got the first voice privilege. You are the ones who have got the major influence over your children. And they want to hear from you, but we have to get out of our comfort zone. So if I was going to actually ask you, just a show of hands, how many of you had a healthy conversation about sex growing up? None. Excellent. Do you see what I mean? And you had to fuddle your way through. Wouldn't it be better that you were a little bit more prepared mentally, emotionally, relationally, going into it? Another question I'd like to, how many of you think it's a good idea and it's probably important for you to talk to your kids about sex? Okay. All right, hands down. How many of you have spoken to your kids about sex? A little bit less. So there's a knowing doing gap. We want to do it. Can't we wait till they're older? Can't we wait till they're just a little bit more mature? Can't we wait till they're 33? My encouragement to you is that it's never too early to talk to your kids at an age-appropriate level to talk about the big issues, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when your children will be exposed to certain things, and it's better for you to be the first person to share this information rather than their friends in school who have got a wealth of experience, or they go to Dr. Google and it's always positive, always uplifting, and always aligns with your values and beliefs. Do you see, get my point? So we have to get out of our comfort zone, and even that icky, awkward, I don't know how to start these conversations. It starts as early as possible, from as little as 4 and 5 years of age. Not all the details, but the importance of their body, and how to value their body, and how unique they are, and how fearfully and wonderfully made they are, and that they have to look after their body. And as they're getting older, then they have to start looking at being careful of what their body does, and who sees them, and who touches them, and who's allowed to be near them when they are semi-dressed or naked. And then you have to go on a little bit more as then when they're going on about how they're growing up in their physiological changes, which we'll talk about in just a few moments. All right? And when I talked about the relationship with my boys, it's because I was involved in their world. So it's all very well to have good information. Like I said, you've got about, 80 people, 80% of people said we should talk about it, and only about 20% have actually done it. So needing to be involved in their world earns you the right to speak into them. And then knowing, doing gap, put it into practice. So you're going to have some homework to do at the end of this. Aren't you going to make you feeling good? Aren't you glad you came? All right. So most of your kids around the age of about 8 to about 15 are known as the Gen Z generation. There's a few little areas, and the new ones, the younger ones, are known as the alphas, and we don't really know what they're going to turn out like, but we know the Gen Zs. These are the screen ages. They're the digital natives. They live and breathe on technology, and it's literally their oxygen. So if you take it away, that's the reason why they freak out. That's the reason why I saw on YouTube just today, in my news feed today, a young lady, 17 years of age, in America, was on the phone in high school. The teacher said, turn it off, put it away. She didn't. She kept on texting. He took it away, and then she attacked the teacher. It's all on video. And then not only does she attack the teacher, she got out a pepper spray and sprayed it onto him. And she was saying, it's my phone. Give me my phone. She was literally feeling that threatened, that it was being taking away her right. And we've got to remember that technology is not a right, it's a privilege. And they have to be very careful about how they see it. And so all the different types of ages and stages, excuse me, is tweens and teenagers. And I like the idea of the bubble wrap generation. This is what parents have done today, is they like to keep their kids very happy. They want to protect them from the big bad world. They want to be able to make them feel safe. They want them not to be unhappy. They don't want them to fail. They protect them. Bubble wrap is one. Another one is helicopter parenting. Or, you want to be really hip, drone parenting. And there's another one called lawnmower parenting, where they make everything smooth and make it easy for them. You're actually doing your children a disservice. And if you would like, and in far as a bonus on downloading the Family Toolkit, I've done a 2-part video series on resilient families. And so one goes for about 15 minutes, the other one goes for 20 minutes, and I just filmed that this week, and it will be available on YouTube for people who download the Family Toolkit. So it's just a little bonus, and I talk about that in that series. So you are still the number one influence over your kids' lives. They want your input. Now, they may not always like it, but they do want your input. But then there's this transition as they're going out of the tween ages to teenagers. There's this transition. It's like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. One day they're angelic and beautiful. The next thing you're going, where did you come from? Nightmares. And it all can happen very quickly. Not every child is that, but there is this transition that their friends become more important or appear to be more important than you as mum and dad. And then they are influenced by popular culture and the media. Now, as your role as parents, you're excellent managers. You control everything. You know when they're younger, what they eat, what they wear, where they're going, who their friends are. You have great control. And as they're going through into adolescence, they sack you. You're fired. Because they're going through a process called individuation. They're going through a process where they're trying to fit into the world. That word individuation means to actually finding out their independence and where they're actually understanding their view of the world, and they think that what they're doing is right. They think what they do, they know it all. Anyone remember what they were like when they were teens and everything like that? There's a quote by a United States author by the name of Mark Twain. He says, when I was 14, I couldn't stand my dad. He didn't know anything. But when I turned 21, I realised how much he had grown. Because that comes out of maturity. But they say, back off, mum and dad, I've got this. Back off, mum and dad, you can't control me. And there's this tension. How much gap do you give? But you've got to give them space, and you've got to give them grace, and you've got to give them the opportunity to make some decisions, even if it makes a mistake. And that's meaning that builds that resilience, that reservoir of tank that when things don't go to plan, I know how to cope. That you're always going to be there. That's the maintaining the relationship. But it's okay for them to make mistakes. And actually it's good for them to face the consequences of their poor choices. You can't control everything. And maybe it's better for them to learn and learn hard as a result. And you're actually setting your kids up for greater success by allowing them to face the natural consequences of their choices. And so as they're going through adolescence, they're going to go under an enormous amount of physiological, relational, psychological changes. Their physical body is changing dramatically. And we can go into a great deal about that in the sense that, they're going to go through puberty. I actually spoke at a grade 5 class about puberty. It was a mixed class, boys and girls, and we're talking about pubic hair. And a boy puts his hand up like this. He was in the front row. He says, "Brett, can I say something?" I said, "Sure, mate, what do you want to say?" He goes, I got hair down there. Thanks for sharing. This is a safe place. But then I did a group, I did a grade 6 class. And it was a mixed class again. And I could tell you, the boys really wanted to know about the menstrual cycle. They wanted to understand. Now, I was a former nurse for 15 years. And my wife said to me, "We've got 3 boys, you're going to give them the talk." I said, "Okay." I said, "What happens if we had girls?" She said, "You would have been giving them the talk as well." I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you're the nurse." And I said, "You're a girl. You're a woman. You go through this." And she goes, "I can have it, but I don't want to explain it." Hopefully you don't take that as gospel that you should leave it to the nurse. But we all have these conversations. And I'd have to say, the physiological changes, and I haven't got the time about this, and on our website we've actually got how to talk to your kids about puberty and what have you, and I've got some downloadable resources, which I'll tell you a little bit later on. And I'll send you those links for those who have registered, how to provide those things. However, in the sense, if you've got an 8 or 9-year-old girl, if you haven't spoken to them about the menstrual cycle, that's your homework. You have to start talking about what's going to take place in their body, because otherwise they may one day start spotting and they're going to think they've got cancer or dying or something. And if you haven't spoken to your boys about wet dreams, some boys do, sometimes don't, if you haven't spoken to them about that, they're going to think, "Oh my goodness, something's happened." It's a great opportunity to teach them how to use the washing machine, if it ever happens. But all of these things are part of normal way of life. Now, many of you are going, "He's saying that in a church? Can you say that?" I'm not in the main auditorium. I'm in here in a side room. So I'm allowed to use it. Is that okay? It's just checking. And then there's a whole other bunch of other different things about, say, for example, the physiological changes with girls is that they will start developing breasts. And one side may develop faster than the other. Now, if you don't explain that to them, and if you didn't know that, it's something to be informed about. Being informed helps you talk about it. So you can actually say, the budding, it's called budding, and it actually is going to maybe a bit tender, a bit soft, and it may be a bit lumpy, not necessarily cancerous. It just means there's a bit of nodules. And one side of the breast may develop a bit faster than the other, but I can assure you, majority of breasts will catch up. But that just relieves them because information is helpful. And talking about it doesn't mean that it should be embarrassing. It should be a matter of fact. And it's not a monologue, you telling them. You want to encourage them to ask questions. You want them to be involved in the discussion, and it is an ongoing discussion. You start off earlier and you keep on doing just drip feeds along the way. I'll explain that a little bit more later on. And we also know that as they're going through the adolescence, they're going to be much more vulnerable, susceptible to the peer pressure. And there can be positive peer pressure, but there's also that negative peer pressure. And you have to help them, because you're the prefrontal cortex. They're not thinking clearly, to help them be more discerning. asking questions. Have you considered? What are your thoughts? What would happen if this happens? And it's giving them a narrative, which we'll talk about in a little while. And popular culture, pushing the boundaries and risk-taking. Now, risk-taking is part of life, but I would say this generation are less risk-averse than they've ever been before. They're actually doing less things than what we did when we were growing up. Because of fear of failure, fear of people pointing their finger and not being perfect. And I would love to encourage you as mums and dads and caregivers to encourage your young people to take risks, to try new things, to actually, it's okay to make mistakes. And can I just say it? They need to see it from you, that you are willing to take risks. For example, I'll just say, like, if you were scared of jumping from a diving board, for example, in a pool, they knew your kids were saying, mum's chicken, she'll never do that. But you know what? Next summer, I'm going to do it. And then there you are on the end of and your knees are going like this. Your kids will be going, go, mum, go, mum, go, mum. And then you do it, they're going to go off their heads because mum did something out of her comfort zone. She took a risk. That is such thing. That'll be the most valuable lesson for your kids to see, that you are willing to take risks, make a mistake, make a fool out of yourself, and it's okay. Making a mistake is not a failure. It's actually, as I said, it's failing forward. And that's the way we do the most amount of learning. Not out of successes, but out of failures. Yeah, a 1 metre diving board, not the 10 metre, but you could work up to it. You could work up, and then you could actually do, a pike position, and then that'll be. Because your kids are going to say one of two things. It just happened, or it won't happen to me. And I'll just go forward for a second, because the challenges that your kids are going to be facing, and these are some of the big issues: drugs and alcohol, sex and relationships. How many of you, what do you think is the average age a child should be able to go and start dating, for example? I'll go down from 30 and go downwards. 30, all right, 30. Do I see 28? 28, yes. 22. 14. Wow. Yeah, and there'll be some people going, oh. Would you like to know my philosophy on dating? I'll give you my philosophy on dating. Just to give you, you can use this, you can not use this, whatever. We said to our boys, when we want you to have lots of friends, we want you to have friend boys and friend girls. That's how we called it. Have lots of those. We would like for you not to be in a relationship while you're in high school, because they're a distraction, not great for you academically, but a lot of relationships may only last, like 2 weeks at best. And then you're going to see that person for the whole of the rest of your scholastic thing. It's going to make things awkward. And I said, in fact, you don't know what you want yet and what you don't want, and you don't want to complicate that, and maybe wait until you're a bit older when you go into university or you're doing other things. Well, the older two boys knew that was fine. Our youngest son, he actually interpreted that he didn't hear end of high school. He heard 18, and he turned 18 in May. So he thought, June, I'm going to have a girlfriend. Now, the beauty of including the brothers in discussions, and everyone knows where it was, I didn't have to parent. In fact, my sons, the brothers said, you're not allowed to. I didn't have to explain it to them. And they explained the reasons why to my youngest son. And the other beauty thing is having a good relationship with our kids. And I didn't mention this last time, but I encouraged, in any time my boys took a tone with my wife, and I used to use that language, not your mother, don't take your tone with my wife. Makes it a little bit different. And any time I saw my kids take a tone, I would be on them. How dare you talk to my wife like that? Don't you take that tone. Well, one day, my son was doing his VCE, and he, in fact, was a little bit stressed, and he said something that wasn't quite right. And before I could actually get into him, the older brother said, "Dad, leave it to me." And he went to his younger brother and he went, and they walked out, and the younger brother went. Now, we have no idea what took place in that discussion, but this is what happened afterwards. The older brother came out and he said to me, "Dad, it's all right." About 5 minutes later, the younger brother came out and says, "Mum, I'm really sorry for the tone that I took, and please forgive me." I said, "Who needs to be the parent?" It's all through relationship. Not raising your voice, not being, on their case. Yelling doesn't get your message across. Can I just tell you that? Yelling does not get your message across. You know what gets you across? That you're in control. Because if you're losing control and you're telling your kids to get their act together, you're sending a mixed message. I digress and I apologise, but hopefully that was worthwhile to hear. All right. I would say sex and technology go hand in hand in our culture today. And obviously, media and messages goes with the technology. So there's a lot of things, and in that would be the gaming, and I can't cover everything in a very short period of time. But I'm going to focus a little bit on, I'll go back to it. It just sort of happened, and it won't happen to me. There are plenty of opportunities for you to talk to your kids about all the big issues that I just shared. Plenty of opportunities. What you see on the TV, what they see on the news, what they hear on at school. What are your thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about premarital sex? What do you think about drugs? What are your thoughts about getting drunk? And just start the dialogue with them. Just be curious. Now, I don't drink, but I told my boys, just because mum or dad doesn't drink, doesn't mean that we say that you don't have to drink, but you have to determine why you want to drink. And so my older two have decided they didn't want to drink. They just said, it's not for me. Because we actually, I have to say, we used to say, nobody's life has ever been destroyed because of alcohol, not drinking alcohol. But plenty of lives have been destroyed because of alcohol. And we used to do that with, plenty of lives have been destroyed because of technology, but no one's been destroyed with not having a Game Boy. Like we used to put that through there. Because our boys who actually grew up with no technology. Now, I mentioned that at a group of grade 6 boys, and this one boy goes, he could not believe a world that didn't have technology. And he actually lets out this, "That's impossible!" But I digress about the fact is that when it comes to talking about this stuff, and one of my sons, and this is what happened. He went to a party at the age of 18, the first party that had alcohol present. And we knew about this, and he rings up his mum and says, "Mum, just letting you know, I'm going to try alcohol." "Okay, okay, bye." And as she's hanging up, Kate's saying, "Make wise choices." Anyway, the older brother, who was at the same party, rings up Kate and says, "Mum, I'm just letting you know, Cameron is going to try alcohol." And so Kate says this to him, "What were you thinking? Don't you know you're in control?" And he goes, "No, I'm sorry. And then Kate says, "No, it's all right. It's fine." So for a couple of hours, Kate's saying, "What is he going to do? What is he going to do?" I said, "It's okay. He needs to make this his own choice. He needs to make this own conclusion. Because the more that you say you can't do something is like a red flag to a bull, and they want to do the opposite because of that individuation, because they're just naturally, potentially rebellious. And just because you think that they're behaving themselves doesn't mean they are behaving themselves." So he came home from the party, and I waited for him. I said, "So what do you think, mate? What was it like?" And he goes, "Well, Dad, it tastes terrible." I said, "Yes." And I said, "And I saw what it did to my mates, and it's not for me." Done. That conversation I don't have to conclude. We wanted our boys to grow up to be countercultural, to be able to stand up for their values, to stand up for their beliefs, And it's okay not to go along with the patterns of this world. In fact, my eldest son was involved in high-level sport. And sport, when they win, they celebrate with alcohol. When they lose, they commiserate with alcohol. And then everything in between, they have alcohol. And my son was involved in the state lacrosse, and then he also got involved with the Australian team for lacrosse. So he's high level, and he was also high level state in basketball and volleyball. He was just a natural athlete. He went from lacrosse to football, and football was another big alcohol. And he'd go to functions, and they were... He never looked down upon people who did. And in fact, he went to a function that a dozen guys consumed 25 slabs of beer over a 4-day period. And he was holding their jaws in his lap while they were vomiting and defecating at the same time. This is the time of their lives because they were so intoxicated. And I have to say that you have to have those conversations. It's better to have your conversations. These are the big issues. And it's better to have them in the cleanness of life rather than the complexities that will face their way. And preparing them for what they would do if someone offers them a drink. What will you say? What's something will you do? I was in charge at Monash Medical Centre Emergency Department a number of years ago. And a 13-year-old girl, 13, how many of you got a 13-year-old girl? Anyone got a 13-year-old? Anyone yet? Could you imagine your 13-year-old girl goes to a party, you knew about it, but you didn't get the memo that they actually had alcohol at this party. And your little girl didn't know about the alcohol either. But remember, popular culture and peer pressure, two big influences. And people say, hey, why don't you try this alcohol? And and so it's really nice. And because she's petite, she has one drink, and it's the one with the high sugar content. Tastes okay. Her body and metabolism's trying to process it. Prefrontal cortex not quite working. Peer pressure, popular culture, the perfect storm. This young lady at the age of 13 had one drink, had 2 drinks, had 3 drinks. 3 drinks were enough to make her unconscious. An ambulance was called. She came to our emergency department. We had to put a breathing tube into her lungs and to pump her stomach out, basically. And she was okay, she was fine. And I had the delight to ring up her mother. Hello, this is Brett Ryan in charge of Monash Medical Centre. How are you tonight? Yes, yeah, that's fair. Do you know your daughter, you know how she went to a party tonight? Yes. Has she been involved in an accident? No. She's had too much to drink. She's never had alcohol before. She's never done this before. Well, maybe she's done this and this is what's happened. One decision. One simple decision. And speaking of one decision, there was a situation about 5 years ago. A 21-year-old girl went to a nightclub. Didn't drink, didn't do drugs. Went to a nightclub with her friends. Her friend says, hey, I had an ecstasy tablet last week. It was awesome. Why don't you have this? And she said, no, I don't want to have that ecstasy tablet. It's not for me. Go on, just have it this once. You won't know what you're missing out on unless you try it. So the friend picked up the tablet out of her hand, reluctantly put it in her mouth. 10 minutes later, she had an anaphylactic reaction and died there on the dance floor. One decision, one detrimental decision, not only for the family left behind and for her life, but also the young lady who gave her the tablet was then charged with accessory. That's the reason why you've got to talk about these big issues. There are plenty of opportunities to talk about it. And I'll talk about some other things in just a few moments' time. Because they'll say, it just sort of happened. It's going to happen, so you've got to prepare for them, or it won't happen to me. And for those who've got a faith, often the Bible and God, by association, is seen as a rule party pooper. You shall not do this. You shall not do that. But I would say that like anything, and this would be a good analogy, that you'd say in sport there's a boundary line. You stay inside the boundary line, life can be awesome. But if you go outside the boundary, the game will end. There'll be consequences. So you can say, God has created this wonderful, wonderful boundaries. You stay within those boundaries, life can be great. You step outside the boundaries, there'll be consequences of your choices. Live your life to its full, but there'll be consequences if you break the boundaries that I've set. And that's the same thing. You can actually start using that analogy, that terminology. They all have boundaries. And can you imagine if we all decide to, I don't want to drive on the left-hand side of the road. I just want to drive on the right-hand side. And I don't want to follow the speed limit. I just want to drive whatever I like. It will be chaotic. We have rules and guidelines for our safety. The same thing with the guidelines and the rules and the boundaries that you set in your household. But explain the reasons why. Not just for the sake of it, but explain the reasons why. Because it will happen to them, or it won't happen to me. They think they're Teflon. They think they will get out of, nothing will happen to them. No one ever wakes up one day and says, you know what I'd like to be? An alcoholic. No one ever says that. But it takes one drink. They can't stop at one drink. They have to go to 2 drinks. And they can't stop at 2 drinks. They start 3, 4, and it keeps on going. It's a bit like Russian roulette. You just think it may not happen to you, but it may happen. And I'll explain that, another analogy, in just a few moments' time. So, there's a great Hebrew proverb that says, do not conform to the patterns of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Controlling the mind. And it's a battle. It's a battle. And you have to know what the battles are. Now, you can get behaviour as your number one battle. But I would say the number one battle is their heart and their mind. And if you win that battle, it'll help you in your parenting. And so when we say to our children, when they hear that we don't conform to the patterns of this world, but renew your mind, it's say we do things differently. Because you'll hear this line, but Mum, but Dad, Tom, Jane's parents, they're allowed to do it. They're allowed to watch rated MA movies. They're allowed to go out later at night. And you say, well, that's what Jane and that's what Tom does. But in our household, we do things a little bit differently. If you ever hear, everyone's got this. Anyone hear that line? Everyone's doing it. You go, oh, well, why don't we call Erica's parents? Oh, no, Erica's parents, no. What about Samantha's? No, Samantha's parents, no. Well, what happened to everyone? Well, not Erica and not Samantha. And maybe call their bluff. Sometimes you say, well, look, why don't we just call Tom's parents and see if it's okay for them to watch an RA or an MA movie. No, don't do that. Don't do that. Call their bluff sometimes. All right. Our kids are living in a highly sexualized world. This is unfortunately, we're one click away, one temptation away. When I was growing up, it was all about, a magazine, Penthouse or Playboy magazines. That was what it was. But now, it's just one click away. And can I just tell you, if your kids cannot control themselves on an iPad, don't give them a smartphone. In a nutshell, don't give them a smartphone. Because if they can't have the discipline and the maturity to control themselves, don't give them the capabilities of something that has the potential for so much information at a click of a button. It's so accessible. 80% of all pornography is viewed on a smartphone. Or should I say, a not-so-smartphone. No one uses desktops. Very few people use laptops. So either their phones or an iPad. So if you can't get your kids to be controlling themselves on certain things, don't give them other things. So we live in a highly sexualized world. And I'm going to just stop for a few moments just to pause to look to see if there's any questions. Why don't you just have a stretch and then I'll re-look at this. So... All right, so there's a couple of questions. So have a little bit of a stretch. I'm just going to have a drink. And 30 seconds later, we'll come back. All right, that was 30 seconds. Stretch. You can grab some food, keep on coming back, and I'll just keep on going for the sake of time. All right? Just a couple of questions that came through. They're more not questions, they're more statements. One says, parents forced me to study and focus on going to school and doing homeschooling and talking about careers, not about sex. I was punished punished about it at 18. This is, I would say, a lot to do with family of origin. Your parents don't intentionally want to destroy your life, but they're thinking that they're making the best decision for you. And sometimes control seems to be the best decision. And also the fact is that many parents live vicariously through the careers and successes, the rises and falls of their children. And that's the reason why they drive them. But there's a great ancient proverb which says, train up a child in the way that they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Now that's a proverb, not a promise, but the fact is when it says train up a child in the way that they go, which means how they are naturally hardwired, how they are uniquely and wonderfully made, what makes them unique. So if you've got a kid who's wired a certain way, you have to parent them a certain way. If you control everything about them, you may have a level of resentment and bitterness that will always be there. Now, they may behave on a certain way, but on the inside, they're actually resenting it. So my wife is a teacher for 25 years, and she was had a lot to do with the Asian culture at her school that she was teaching at. And many of the parents would be saying to them, and this is not an Asian thing, it's just the fact of the culture that she had to do with, and they would say that at a parent-teacher interview, my daughter or my son is going to be an engineer or an architect or a doctor and all these things. But my wife would say to them, they're actually academically unable to do that. So there's a disconnect. But when you talk to like a daughter, one of the girls, she said, "What I want to do in my life is I just want to be a kindergarten teacher. I just love kids." But the parents are saying, "You're going to be a doctor. I want to be a kindergarten teacher." Do you see there's a disconnect? Train up a child in the way that they are hardwired, not the way that you want to wire them, but the way that they are hardwired, and allow them the beautiful ability to use their God-given gifts and talents and skills to honour God in the way that they do that, as well as being able to honour you, to see their life being fulfilled and that they are feeling impassioned to do what they have called. Not because you told them to do. That's a different thing. And again, I'm not going to be able to cover everything, but hopefully that was helpful. Someone else says, my parents told me that mistakes are not acceptable, and Dad chose my subjects, which were career-minded, and got punished, not allowed to see friends after school. Again, this is not a control, and sometimes it's out of fear, and I am very sorry that that's happening to you, but don't allow your experiences to shape the way that you parent. Those things were probably at the time the best thing that your parents could do. They thought they were doing doing you the best. But don't allow that to dictate the way that you do your parenting. Allow your kids to blossom and use their passions and motivations and find out what makes them tick and actually tap into that. What if parents continue to control their offspring beyond the age of 18 because of their culture and the age they behave? That's a great question. All right, if you wanted to know a little bit more about this, the leave and cleave. So say, for example, they get married, all right? And I actually listened to a podcast about this today, about leave and cleave. And it's I've been talking about this quite a lot at marriage functions. And then there's this tension between, the scriptures talk about honor thy mother and father. Honor it doesn't say obey. It says obey when they're younger, but a way you can honor your parents is actually to be free and independent. It actually says that you as parents have actually brought me up to become independent. You can still honor them, you can still respect them. That's what the honor is, but doesn't mean you have to be obedient to them, especially if they're saying things that are contrary to where you are hardwired. So again, that's how you're brought up, and I would be saying, Mum or Dad, I honor you, I respect you, but I'm going to make this decision as an adult. And I trust that you're going to allow me to make these decisions, whether they're good for me or bad for me. I need to find out these things for myself. Do it in a tone, do it in a volume, do it in a respectful, loving, caring way, and actually put your point across. Now, you might have to agree to disagree, but you don't want your relationship to be broken as a result of this. You don't want to just be disowned, but at the same time, you need to be able to make these decisions yourself. And in fact, it's not, for those who are Christians, those people who are faith followers, the best way you can honour your mother and your father is to become completely independent of them. Still have a relationship with them, but not be codependent on them. Codependent on their approval, codependent on their finances, codependent on everything else. You want to be interdependent. You want to be actually free of those things. Hopefully that has helpful for you. Another question is, my parents control if I go to my boyfriend's house. Is this normal? Well, again, how old you are and other questions, and I'll talk about dating in a few moments. Is that okay? All right, so there's some good questions there. Hopefully I've answered most of them, but I'll come back to them if I don't. I'm going back to this highly sexualized world and pornography. And kids will look at pornography for a variety of reasons. They'll look at it for maybe accidentally, curiosity. My son actually heard a word in the lunch yard, and he wanted to find out what that word was. He hadn't heard it before, and he looked it up at school, which is a big mistake because they have those, filters. And so he pushed these words into the computer, and then the SWAT team came and arrived, and and just sort of, what are you doing? And he goes, I don't know, I heard this word. And so curiosity sometimes is one of those things. And a lot of children are looking at it educationally. They think that they are behind the 8 ball. So again, your role is to start talking about sex in a much more positive, much more affirming way. Sex is not a bad thing. Sex is not a wrong thing. Sex is not a yucky thing. It's a beautiful thing that's been created to be cherished, to be valued, to be esteemed, to be highly valued. But yet, in our culture today, it's been distorted. And we've seen it time and time again. You know what I'm talking about, that, it won't happen to me? No one actually says, I can turn off at any time. But we know the addictive nature of pornography is growing extensively. And it's not just a guy issue, it's also a girl issue. In fact, I was on a plane trip up to Queensland just recently. I sat next to a guy, and we just got talking on the trip, and he goes, what do you do? And I said, I work for an organisation called Focus on the Family. He's fascinating. It's a great conversation starter. And he goes, and what do you talk about? I said, I talk about healthy families, healthy relationships. I talk about healthy sexuality and technology. He goes, that's so good. That's really needed. He goes, I had a mate of mine, and his wife confronted him and said, you're looking at pornography. He goes, I'm not looking at pornography. I said, no, don't lie to me. I see it in the search engine, the history, that you're looking at pornography. He goes, it's not me. And then she said, well, who is it? It turns out it was their 11-year-old daughter who'd been habitually looking at pornography. And I've got a friend of mine who's a child psychologist who's got children, his clients, as young as 8 years of age, who are addicted to pornography. What's the supervision? Where are they getting this from? That's the reason why we need to be so careful of how our kids consume technology, and don't use technology as a wonderful babysitter. And dare I say, there'll be a lot of you going, that's me, I'm guilty of that. I can't stand when I see a child at the age of 2 looking at a phone. I just can't stand it. And that's another talk again about technology. I can't give you all the things about technology, but there's so much in that topic about protecting your kids and having rules and regulations and guidelines to say we're not going to have phones or technology in your rooms. If you want to look at these things, it's going to be out in public. We're going to have days where we're going to have technology-free days. We're going to exchange it for playing card games or Uno or Catan or something like that. We're going to exchange it for something positive and family. We don't want to live on our devices. But it's no good to you to say, get off your devices. Yeah, sorry, John. Yeah, thank you. Because a kid will smell a hypocrite a mile away. You've got to live this. If we are on our devices all the time, in fact, my son, youngest son, said and wanted my attention. I was on my phone doing work, which is these wonderful things. Our phones are our office. People can contact you at all time of the day and expect you to answer at all time of the day. And I was looking at my device, and he was trying to get my attention. And he says, Dad. And I said, what? He says, you're worse than a 16-year-old girl. And I said, I feel really sorry for the 16-year-old girls, but I was really challenged by my son, who said, you're worse than a 16-year-old girl. He said, I have to role model this. I have to disconnect from my devices. I have to disconnect and have my own, what I call good technology hygiene myself. about how I consume things. And all these things, can I just say, has destroyed so many people's lives. And in fact, it's probably in the top 3 reasons why marriages break down is pornography. And it's not just a guy issue, and it's not just a young person's issue. I spoke at a men's breakfast on this topic. I was asked to speak on pornography. And the data would say that about 60% of church-going men are looking at pornography on a semi-regular basis. That's what the data is actually saying. And about 30 to 35% of women are looking at pornography on a semi-regular basis. That's what's happening inside the four walls of the church, never alone out in this culture. But there's not a lot of difference. And also, about 30% of habitual viewers of pornography seeking professional help are now women. So we're seeing an increasing number. So it's not just a guy issue. But when I spoke at this men's breakfast, at the end of it, I had a 75-year-old gentleman come up to me and said, "You're the first person to ever speak about this topic." He's been dealing with this issue for 45 years. He said, "Thank you for sharing this." And I'm thinking, it's a very sobering thought, but that's what I'm saying. It's not just a young person's issue, it's an older person's issue. And we need to start being more proactive rather than reactive and having conversations. And I'm going to give you some strategies to do that in just a few moments' time, because it changes their whole value systems and behaviours and the way that they view women, the way that they're actually seen as a plaything and degrading, dehumanising, criminal in fact. And all of these things are something that we as a society look down upon, but it is so normalised in our culture today. And it's extraordinary how many people are consuming it, because it's been normalised or desensitised in our culture, that we need to ensure that it doesn't happen on your watch. And explaining the reasons why. Because you want to set up your kids for success now, but in their future. Because they could say, well, when I get married, you know what, I'm going to have sex on tap. That's all. I think it's going to be wonderful. Anyone else have that when they thought they, no, don't have to show your hands. But the fact is, no, I can see elbows, all right. The fact is, in our culture today is that it's been distorting our view of sexuality, of something that God had created so beautifully, and yet the society has distorted it. And so many relationships have been struggling because, well, let's face it, for women, they can't keep up with this virtual world. And it's so demoralising and dehumanising. And yet it's seen as to be normal in our culture today and not is going to happen on your watch. So here are a few things. It's imperative for you to have some conversations, especially when it comes to sexuality. So a couple of things that I would say. Remember, do not respond, but react. So a question, homework. This is homework for you. Anyone got a 10-year-old? All right, any 10-year-olds? Okay, all right. Here's a question you can have. All right. Hey mate, I'm just wondering, I went to a presentation last night, and the guy there, he was really funny. But he said something really to me, and I wanted to touch bases with you. He said that, images could pop up onto our screen at any time, a naked picture or a semi-naked picture. I'm wondering, has that ever happened to you? The kid will look at you. No, it never ever happened. That's great. But I wanted to let you know, if it ever happens to you, an image comes on and it makes you feel uncomfortable, a bit queasy, a bit funny, I want you to come and tell me. Oh, now that you said that, yeah, I've seen it once. Maybe twice, 3 times, but that's it. Well, do you have any questions? Because I want to let you know that if this happens, I'm not going to look down upon you. You haven't done anything wrong. This is part of life. But I want you to know that this is not good for you. And then go on to have the conversation, talking about it. Now, my wife has given me permission to say this because we discovered one of our sons was looking at pornography. Initially, she thought it was me, so that was a great conversation. It wasn't me. And she reacted. She went off she was sobbing. She was in the fetal position, basically, on her bed, crying. And I said, mate, this is not, Mum's okay. And he goes, I'm already feeling guilty. I'm only feeling shame. And Mum's making me feel worse. So I go and tell Kate. And I said, mate, Kate, you can't do this. He's already feeling pretty bad. And he goes, I'm not. And she said, I'm not mad at him. I'm mad at someone's taking away his innocence. I said, he doesn't know that. Why don't you go and tell them? So Kate actually apologized. And then it opens it up. And, it actually opens up the conversation. If we react, it means they won't want to talk about these things. But if we respond, maybe on the inside, freaking out, on the outside, cool, calm, and collected. Same thing when it happens with maybe, when I'm talking about giving a narrative, like a script of what happens. Has anyone, if you've got a 13-year-old girl or a 14-year-old girl or a 15-year-old girl, you can actually say, has anyone ever asked for a naked picture of you? And they go, no way. No way. Well, what would you say? I can tell them where the sun don't go, they're showing, what I'm going to do with them. Good on you, that's my girl, well done. Or they could actually say, well, actually, yes, they have, remember? Respond, not react. What did you do? Well, I didn't send a picture. Well, good on you, that's great. Or they might say, actually, I did send a picture, but I didn't send my face. And I'm not fully naked. Remember, respond, not react. Did you think that was wise? Oh, yes, it was okay because I won't be able to identify myself. Do you trust this person? Do you think this person won't share it with somebody else? No, I haven't thought about that. Because there's a whole different thing, and I don't know if sexting is a new form of flirting. It's a new way of showing someone I like you. When we were growing up, we used to write a note, or we punched them, like I really like you, bang. Whereas this day and age, they actually want to send these images of naked picture of themselves, or semi-naked. And it's been, again, normalised in our culture. But we need to, and I actually spoke at a Christian school, and the year 8 cohort, so the year 8, so they're 14-year-olds, about 60% of the cohort had actually been sending messages to and from each other. So it can happen at all different ages. Now, it's not as popular as everyone thinks it is. It's not as prevalent as everyone thinks it is, but it's still around. And they don't understand the legal ramifications that if they send those images to somebody else, it's actually counted as child pornography or soliciting. And they can actually be charged with that. So they don't see the repercussions of what could actually take place. And so that's your job, to actually have those conversations. So whether it's alcohol, whether it's drugs, whether it's premarital sex, whether it's pornography, these are the big issues that your kids will need to be talking about. And we're talking about popular culture. Another popular culture is gaming, the gaming world. How do we go about this idea of, that kids can be consuming and they can be lost in it? The length of time, the average length of time a teenager or a preteen would spend on a technology device per day? Does anyone hazard a guess how many hours it would be? 2? Anyone think it's 2? 3? 6? Higher? The average length of time a teenager or preteen would spend in front of a screen is about 9.5 hours per day. Now you're thinking, where does that come from? Well, because they do a lot of school on devices now. They do homework on devices. Then they do the social media on devices. Then they do their fun, YouTubing and Netflixing or whatever platforms they are. Then they might communicate with their friends on social media. It adds up. And if I was to do an audit on you, you could imagine, and you know how your phones can actually track, you'd be surprised how many times you could spend on front of devices. I actually spoke at a mothers group, a MOPS group, mothers of preschoolers, and I spoke about this to technology, and I remember speaking to the mothers. It was a big group, and I said, and I don't know about you, and I don't know what possessed me to say. I said, what are you role modeling? And I said, are you putting your device, your kids in front of a screen so you can be on a screen? I said, some of you might be on Candy Crush, and at the time the Candy Crush was the big popular thing. And 2 women came up at the end at my presentation, and they said, that was me. I spend 3 to 4 hours a day on Candy Crush. Shame on me, they said, no. And I said, how easy, and we can all get involved with scrolling, looking at the media, just media devices. And so our young people are using it, and we use it as babysitters, or what I say, like a dummy, a pacifier, just to keep them quiet. And if we get in the habit now, and I can guarantee, if you've allowed that to take place now, it's very, very difficult to rein it back. Not impossible, it's just difficult. But if you've got younger kids, I would be encouraging to start some boundaries now, include them, put those into place, but don't allow that to keep on moving. Because what happens, you can say to your kids, in 5 minutes' time, you've got to turn off your gaming device. So 5 minutes goes, and we used to set the alarm or something like that, a device or something, and then you'd hear these words, and you'd say, turn it off, and they go, I'm on my highest score. Can I have 5 more minutes? You say, yeah, okay, 5 more minutes. 5 minutes comes up. When my man dies. And after they've done that, I'm with my mate now. Can I talk to him for another 5? And you can see from just 5 minutes, it's ended up being 15 to 20 minutes longer, because who's controlling the message, the controls? They've got control because you're allowing it to happen. So it's better to actually, and don't always just turn it off. Give them warnings. Set the alarm on a phone, or set their alarm on the oven or something like that. Set them up to actually say, hey, in 5 minutes' time or 10 minutes' time, or when I got 3 grandchildren, and they were staying with us, and my daughter-in-law did this beautifully, and they said, when Bluey finishes, we're turning it off. And so she'd say, what happens when Bluey finishes? We're going to turn it off. So when Bluey finishes, what do? We're going to turn it off. Because he knew and follow it through. So just those little things can make all the difference when it comes to connect with your kids. Technology, media, popular culture, start allowing your kids to be discerning, challenging their status quo, looking at the things about sex or gaming world, or all these things that can make all the difference in your world. So when I say the last one here about having external filters, there's some great things you can have. Your internet providers will provide great resources and things, but we need to encourage our kids to have internal filters. The ability to turn off, the ability to divert their eyes, the ability to actually say, this is not good for me. And it's all very well for you to be there, but you can't be there 24/7. You can't keep them in bubble wrap. You can't be lawnmower parenting. You can't be drone parents. You need to allow them the privilege of having some freedom, that you trust them. But remember, if trust is broken, it's going to take a while to earn that trust. And that is, for a teenager, once trust, they want to be trusted. But if trust is broken, it's going to take a while for you to earn that trust. All right, so I want to give you, just finishing in the time remaining, and I'll go back to some more questions. But these are some tips, and I'll put them all up so you can take photos if you wanted to, is to connect with this generation. To really connect with this generation, we need to give them our undivided attention. We need to give them, and quite often we could be on our phones, yeah. We're not stopping and giving their undivided attention. Something simple, something easy, but our kids want it. And it's not necessarily look at me. They don't want that. But they want to connect with you on a deeper level. And listen to them and actually value their opinion. Tell them, why do you think that would be a good idea? What's your thoughts about this? How do you think, what would you think of the outcome would be this? And ask their opinion. It's just a simple thing. And you're listening to them and you're validating them. They're entitled to their opinion. It may be completely wrong, but they're entitled to that opinion. You've got life experience. You've got expertise. They haven't had it. And so you have to actually come alongside them and see it through their lens, see it through their perspective, and come alongside them. If you're telling them what to do all the time, they don't have the privilege of growing up, because one day they're going to leave the nest and they're going to say, what do I do now? So giving them responsibilities little by little at an age-appropriate level about different things will help them become more discerning about some of the big issues that they're going to be faced with. Other things is if you say to your kids, can I offer a little bit of advice? And they say no. Well, I'm going to give it to you anyway. That's not allowing them again. But you might say, it doesn't shut the conversation up. Say, look, that's fine. I'm available to you. What I'll talk about to you in a couple of days' time. So you can come back to it. Hey, you remember we spoke about the last day? Have you come to any conclusions? I just wanted to give you an opportunity. Can I give you a bit of advice? Just some thoughts? I'd always encourage people to sort of invite them into your world so that you can get, so things like, because they think you were born old, basically. They think you were, they think you have no life experience. And you could say, actually, when I was 16, I gave your grandma and grandpa, I gave them a lot of problems. I spoke back, I yelled at them. You spoke back to Nanny and Pa? You spoke, I can't believe it. Or when I was 13, I failed an exam. You failed? Do you see, it makes you more real. Because you were born old. They don't understand that you were once a teenager themselves. And to understand that and share some of your story. Now, you don't have to go into great detail about everything and all your skeletons in your closet. Maybe at an appropriate time, you might need to share some of those skeletons because that's where you get your life experiences. You learn from your mistakes and you don't want your kids to make the same mistakes. So as a result, the pendulum swings. So you want to control everything. But they need to go through some of those things themselves. And I finally said about relationship, it's so important. Maintaining a healthy relationship, coming alongside them, cheering them on, encouraging them to be who God created them to be. And to talk about these things. And I saw this statement here. It says, the greatest enemy of sexual, mental, and relational health is silence, not talking about it. And I'd encourage you to start talking about these things. All these things, especially when it comes to mental health, checking in them on a regular basis. How are you going? How are you going really? What's something good happening in your world and what's something bad? And we've seen a higher level of anxiety, higher level of stress, higher level of depression. And it's probably the number one issue that's facing young people today is mental health. The second one could be social justice issues. They're very much on the social justice. This generation is very much on social justice issues. And now it's body image is a big thing with kids. And it's not just boys, it's also not just girls, it's also boys. Boys having to have the six-pack and, no pimples and, looking the classic haircut and, the cut down the side of their hair and all sorts of things. And the latest, these are all big things. And dare I say it, gender and all that thing is not the top 10 things that young people are dealing with. Believe it or not. The research, Mission Australia did a great survey, and you can go to their website, Mission Australia, and there's downloadable things. And justice is part of that, but gender diversity and all those things are not part of their latest concerns. They're just trying to get through life. And we are seeing that the mental health post-COVID, things has increased significantly in the level of social anxiety. And if you've got someone who's suffering that, I've got some more things on that family cast on how to deal with anxiety and depression and different things. So if you would like to find out more resources, don't hesitate to contact us. I've mentioned at the beginning that I don't want to leave you hanging. So I've written a whole article about how to talk to your kids about sex, all the different ages and stages, and how to talk to your kids about menstruation, how to talk to them about masturbation, how to talk about LGBT. There's all sorts of things, all the different little snapshots. So I'd encourage you to have a look at that. Drugs and alcohol is another thing. We need to be informed. And I have to say, the gateway for harder drugs has always been alcohol. Alcohol is the first legal drug. And a lot of people think, well, if I allow my kid to have taste of alcohol under my roof, it'll be better for them. But all the research and the evidence would say the longer they have their first taste of alcohol, the better it is. So it still has a legal age of 18, but even if they can delay it for longer, the better it will be for them. So it's just a side thing. So there's some different things. You can go to our website. If you would also, for those who've got a faith, and you would like to have, and I've only got one copy, this is the prototype, a little devotional book. We would love to post that out to you. If you'd like to have that delivered to you, even if we run out of these ones, I'll send you an older one, and then you can be on the list for the next one coming out in term 3. So this is just available. Just need your name and address, so that's available to you if you'd like. And if you'd like to ask some more questions, you can go to Slido, that number. And then finally, I'll just put you on, if you need to contact me or our website, and please go and have a look at that website, and please download the Family Toolkit on our website. And as I mentioned last week, we are a donor-supported ministry and rely on the generosity of people to make everything for free, to make sure people are pleased about that. So I've answered many of the questions about the control aspect. There is a very similar theme. So I'm just going to go and ask a few more questions. And I'm just going to put my glasses on. And then I'll do it in about 5 minutes, and then I'll let you out. Is that all right? And if you need to go, please go ahead. When the parents meet their child's boyfriend or girlfriend for the first time, it's like a job interview. They want to meet his or her parents. Their child is 50. Their child is 50. That's a little bit. I think it's good to actually include your parents, because your kids, you know your kids better than you know yourself, as a child. And so we said to our boys, we think we should choose your lifelong partner. So we wanted to do arranged marriages. And so, in fact, my eldest son, when he was 12, there was a young lady that I had mentored as a kids pastor. She was 15. And I said to Kate, I think I found the girl for one of our boys. So I went up to her mother and I said, do you believe in arranged marriages? And she said, if it's one of your sons, yes. 11 years later, they met and were engaged within 4 months and then married in 11 months. So I thought, done. So, yeah, it can be a bit like a job interview, but you don't want to pressure them. You want to do life in general. And let's face it, we're on our best behaviour when we meet our new potential boyfriend and girlfriend. We're wooing them. But it's good for them to see you in your natural habitat, and for also to see your parents in your natural habitat. So it's all very well to be like a job interview, but don't try and make it treasured. It's just one of those facts of life. Teens might see the pokies-like time zone and decide to have a go and get addicted, especially if they go with friends. They are over 18. Again, you can't control everything. But again, it's a money pit. I can guarantee that the house doesn't lose. You might think that they win, or you can win, but the house always... I think that the new gambling advert, you win some, you lose more. If you're prepared to waste money, by all means. In fact, I saw someone buy a pack of cigarettes just recently, and it cost $55. Did you realise that a pack of cigarettes costs $55? That's a lot of money. But the new thing, addictive behaviour, is vaping, and we're seeing this increase significantly. And in New South Wales, the education minister is actually seeing as kids as young as 5 and 6 years of age getting access to vaping. So it's, extraordinary to think that this is happening because it's easy access. And so vaping is another thing. And if you'd like to find out, I might send you more information. I think I'll send it to you some more information on the email out that I'll send to you about vaping if you'd like to have that. Again, the desensitization. Gambling is now another form of desensitization. When you say, what team do you going to barrack for? They go, what are the odds? They don't follow the team, they follow the odds. When Jock Sonfarello died from possible overdose on tablets and depression, teenagers see this and decide to end their life. They also hear teen suicide on news. Yeah. There's a thing called suicide clusters. We also see another thing that I haven't spoken about is self-harming. Now, self-harming is not necessarily suicidal thoughts, but self-harming is actually cutting themselves or scratching themselves. It's a form of control. When they're in pain internally, they actually result in causing them pain externally. And it's not uncommon for a child in one school to do some self-harming and they get all this attention. So guess what happens? Someone says, I want that attention as well. So then they go and do it. So that's the reason why they have their either suicide clusters or self-harming clusters. So if you ever hear that happening into your school, that is your red flag and alert to check in on your kids on a very, very regular basis. What would you approach vaping the same way as alcohol? Yes, is the answer. Yes. In the United States, which vaping is much more prevalent, we're seeing 17 and 18-year-olds awaiting lung transplants for the amount of damage they have done to their lungs, irreparable, and they're on waiting lists, and they're not readily available to have that many lungs available, so it's quite detrimental. Again, it's innocent. They think it's okay, but the addictive nature, and also because they're fruity flavours, sweet flavours, it looks pretty cool. You know, they can do blowing bubbles in vaping smoke. It looks very cool. It doesn't smell like cigarette smoke can do, but it is just as harming, if not more addictive than smoking. Today, our kids are likely to try vaping over before cigarettes. My SAT was cigarettes, went from then Zap. My SAT was cigarettes.
I'll try and quickly type that question. I'm dyslexic. No, I shouldn't. Joke. My question there is that our kids will try vape before alcohol?
Well, it depends on the environment they're in. Yeah, cigarettes were a common thing. You know, it was seen as like a rite of passage. Alcohol seems to be still a rite of passage, and I would actually see vaping, God bless you, would be seen as a rite of passage. It's a bit like try it because you don't know what you're missing. And if they're in an environment, so that's the reason why you have to be aware of what your kids are connecting with and who they're doing with. And it's not necessarily the Spanish Inquisition. You are generally concerned about them. And again, maintaining the relationship is so vitally important. So even maybe as your children are younger, so what do you think of vaping? What are your thoughts about it? They might go, oh, I've never heard about it. Well, why don't we do some learning together? Let's go on this journey together. Let's consider it. Let's have a look at the risks and what can you do. And so what do you think about at the end? So you're getting them to learn with you and they'll come to their own conclusions. No, it doesn't sound good for me, Dad. It doesn't sound good for me, Mum. Great. If you keep on saying, no, it's wrong, you're never going to do it, and if you touch this, you're going to get out of my house. Shut the conversation. I'm going to keep this secret. Not healthy. I'm just going to close in prayer. I'm going to hang around a little bit further. Hopefully I've answered most of the questions there. Hopefully you found tonight worthwhile and may it be a catalyst for some really healthy conversations at home. Our resources on our website will be available to you if I haven't covered everything, but I try to cover a lot of things in a very short period of time, especially when it comes to sexuality. It's never too early to talk to your kids. I'll leave you with one story. There's one young man at the age of 7 or 8 went up to his dad and says, Dad, where did I come from? Dad said, oh man, didn't think you would ask this question, so he proceeded to tell the whole story. And the kid's going, I can't believe you're telling me, And he says, why did you say that? He says, well, Tom says he comes from Rowville, and Sam comes from Narre Warren. I just want to know where I come from. So it's always good to clarify the question before giving an answer. Let me pray. Father God, I just thank you so much for all the families represented. And I pray, grant them wisdom, grant them insights, grant them the ability to discern and connect with their kids at a much deeper level. And Lord, let the conversations be bound with joy and laughter, and also for the kids to make wise choices, to set them up for success now and into the future. I pray for those who are doing it tough. Grant them the wisdom to know what to say, when to say things, how to say things, that will help them connect with their young people. And I pray just if they're doing it even further tougher, let them seek the right help and support. I pray a blessing upon each and every one of them, and the families represented in Jesus' most wonderful name. Amen. Thanks very much, everyone. I appreciate you coming along.